Hey, welcome back to Archetypical. Jason Webster, CEO, founder, Archetype, and Sammy Boukhris. We met in the last episode here, reviewing your episode 1 and 2 of your Fragile blog and podcast.
Correct.
Right. And I think let's recap a little bit about what we've covered and kind of figure out where we go from here. But so I would characterize, and you get a chance to do the same job, is that whenever you hear "but," it's a butt wipe.
I'm glad that's what you got
That's
from
what I heard from it. Yep.
interviews.
It's now part of my vernacular.
Yeah.
When my kids say, "Daddy, I'm going to do this," but butt wipe.
Exactly.
So that's with me now. I've got it right. No, but more importantly, I think we were kind of in the throngs of really defining Agile. What is Agile versus waterfall? But also actually fighting for its merits or risks, right? So when we talk about Agile, for me as a business owner and truly a kind of lifelong consultant, my concern is how do I deliver something of value to my customers that they're excited about and happy to write the check, the final check. They say, "Oh, only this much? Happy to write it. In fact, where do I leave the tip?" Right? Never happened, but that's what I'm hoping for one day, right? And that really relies heavily upon the idea that we're doing something that brings more value than the cost and complexity and annoyance of having consultants brings.
Appreciate you implying that I'm annoying. That's
I was a consultant first.
True.
You're only recently a consultant. I've been a consultant for a long time.
Fair.
Yeah. So you're annoying now, but I was annoying a long time before you were annoying. Yeah.
Many years that you have ahead of me of being annoying.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask my wife. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, and I appreciate again you taking the time to talk to me about this, and the series 3 and 4 of that blog and the videos are coming out I think we already pushed them out, and I kind of the intention of those is really to bring it to full circle. I think with the first 2 I was addressing a lot of problems, and I wanted to provide some solutions for people. And again, starting simple. I think in one of them I referenced just it's all about simplicity. And then once you think it's simple, like take it back even further and become more and more simple. With number 4, there's a story that I shared in that one, and I'll just briefly touch on it about one of the teams that I inherited where they had just capacity that it just didn't exist. They had diminishing capacity. They were constantly under the gun. They prioritized the work that they focused on based on which customer was the loudest. And it was literally, these customers had the number of the CEO and they'd call and all of a sudden, we'd get a call and okay, that's the customer that got completed. Yeah. It wasn't healthy. And that's how they operated for years and years. I set a goal for them of just visualizing their work. That's all I wanted them to do is just put it on a board. Once we put it on that board and we started visualizing the work, that's when the meltdown actually started. She called me, the team lead called me crying, saying that she didn't understand how they were going to get all this work completed. Right. And when we stopped for a second, I said, what changed? What changed from yesterday to today? Because all we did is push it to production and all of a sudden there's all this work on the board. And she said, well, I can see the work. And I said, right, that's half of the battle right there.
Right.
You never got to even see the work to a point. Now you can go figure out how to go tackle it. So then we started prioritizing. We were able to say, okay, we're going to go deliver this client's, whatever that deliverable is, by this time. And a lot of times it was a difficult conversation to have with the client. Well, yeah, we're going to go complete, this transformation by 3 months from now. Well, that's not a great discussion to have, but at least the client said, okay, well, at least I know when I'm going to be completed.
Yeah.
Right.
Reminds me of a story. Years prior to Archetype, I was, believe it or not, a consultant working for another consulting firm. And our customer was a Big 5 consulting shop. Mm-hmm. So the names you recognize, right? I'll call them Big 5 from this perspective to keep protect the guilty, right? But we were brought in because Big 5 was looking at selling their business to a new ownership, and they had to implement a traditional Norton Kaplan balanced scorecard. A balanced scorecard is basically a methodology that's used to measure value. And financial value is one part, but innovation is part of it, human capital is part of it. And it's really, back then, it was years ago, it's like how do we do a well-rounded job of measuring value? Because sometimes cash on the balance sheet and profitability might be at the expense of like destroying your people, and your human capital value is very low. So healthy companies are healthy in all four quadrants: learning and growth, balance sheet, so on and so forth. So we came in to build this system that was going to gather a bunch of data from across that professional services firm and measure them. And by measuring them, I mean all their partners who were part owners and had a stake in the game, measure their ability to execute against all four quadrants. So we had a team of roughly 12 people building out this technology platform and the applications and the dashboards. And they had assigned to us a revolving door of project managers who worked for them for big consulting, but lived with us like day to day and were in charge of us. Mm-hmm. And it was truly like a revolving door. But I remember one gentleman in general who walked in, and the first day he came in, he said hello. And we had a room that was packed to the gills with consultants. We had brought our own server. So we basically rented a server on a dolly we could pull in because it was the only reliable place we could do our modeling of the stuff. And so we said, fine, so be it. If we can't get access to the right big consulting server, we'll set up our own. And it was plugged into a power strip, which plugged into probably another power strip, plugged into an outlet.
Right.
And this new project manager walks in, sits down on his laptop, opens it up, and he needs a plug, and he looks down and arbitrarily pulls a plug out to put us in. He didn't ask anybody. He just said, "Hey, I it's like Russian roulette, like something like you're done. You're done." Pulls it, and it happened to be the plug for the server. So this room that like rings at 50 decibels all day long with these fans running for a server, all of a sudden goes quiet. Well, the nature of the database we're working with and the work we're doing, there's really no concern with that because it's just the way it's designed. You don't really lose stuff. It's just, it might be the last 5 minutes, but it's not a big deal. But man, did we make a big deal out of it.
Of course.
We enjoyed that. We enjoyed the next hour of like telling this poor project manager all the work he'd undone and reversed. And he felt terrible. He kind of backed up and left within the hour. Well, the next day he comes in and he has the gall to go to our whiteboard. And we had all kinds of lists, which to me, I think our lists back then, they weren't real pretty, but it was like, it was seeing the work. So like you finish something, you spin around, you look at the whiteboard and say, okay, what are our priorities? And there's a bunch of lists and ordered different ways. And we had a great, Christy was our project manager. She was fantastic. And she just kept us organized, right? So you could literally pick up your work, look back and say, okay, so team C is on what next? He comes into the whiteboard and he erases the thing, which on its own was a feat because it's like 8 feet wide, 4 feet high. It's on a chair erasing this. He erases the whole thing. And then he takes the project plan out of Microsoft Project, the Gantt chart, and he draws it on the whiteboard.
Okay.
Literally, doing his very best to like model this thing on there. And that was his like afternoon's work.
Okay.
2-3 hours drawing this Gantt chart on the whiteboard. And to your point, we landed up with this Gantt chart, which we all could access in the actual Microsoft Project file on our laptops or desktops. But he felt obligated to need to be on the whiteboard. But he erased actually all of the dance steps that we used to kind of navigate the day.
Right.
For him, he wanted to make sure that whether we liked it or not, we could see that Gantt chart on a whiteboard. But to me, it's almost the biggest oxymoron in the world. Like a whiteboard is not where you do permanent work.
Right.
Right. It's brainstorming. It's free thinking. It's evolution. It's agile. Right. And he, in some ways, in his efforts to move us forward in terms of organization and structure, he moved us backwards.
Right.
Right. And it's like we all got a kick out of it because we knew that like we obviously had a big egos of our own as consultants, but we thought we were smarter and better than the big five consultants, right? And we're not. We're all the same basic thing. But it was kind of just a unique story. It almost feels almost relevant to what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm assuming this was pre-smartphone, so there were no pictures taken of the whiteboard before he erased it, right?
We had BlackBerries back then.
So, no pictures. You lost that data, and effectively, he didn't come in and ask the team what they wanted.
No.
He made a series of assumptions and thought this was the way that you manage a project, and this is what the team wants. And that's, again,
I don't think want was ever part of his vocabulary. I think he was trying to get eyes on him, right? It's like he was trying to walk in the room and snap attention to him and say, hey, I'm in charge here. I'm responsible for you guys. You guys need to pay attention to me. I'm going to walk you through this project plan together. That's how I'm going to get you to this. This is my like my X's and O's, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you ever view him as part of the team? Did he ever feel like he was part of the team?
He didn't, because he knew he broke our unwritten rules.
Right.
And it's funny. You can be, I'm a CEO, right? So whatever that means, like at the end of the day, like I can walk into a room and I can like upset the apple cart, and I can be in charge, but you can tell that with nonverbal cues, like you are not
right.
welcome or valued, or like you just broke some unwritten rules.
Yep.
And those rules are important, right? Because teams have culture that they operate with to work well together.
Correct.
And I don't care who you are. You can be the CEO or you can be whatever. You walk into a team and disrupt the culture that makes them work well together, you don't get away with it on like 100%.
Right.
They'll fall in line if you really make them, but like you don't get away with it.
That's right. Absolutely. And that, I think that point is critical to think about, right?
Yeah.
In one of the blog posts I referenced that even though I didn't own any of the work that the team was responsible for, they still considered me part of the team.
Yeah.
And it's because I understood and I worked with them through their process. I actually owned pieces of the process rather than saying, okay, Jason, go do this and this is how you operate. I said, okay, I'll do that for you, right?
Yeah.
And eventually they saw that in order for them to adopt the process, I need to be bought in. I need to understand how it fit into their existing process.
Yeah.
And then understand that it solved for problems that they were having. So in order to solve for the problems, of course, I had to take the time understanding the problems. Well, how am I going to understand the problems if I don't ask the questions and go live it with them?
Yeah. Right. And we're talking about like the desert island concept, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about any team structure, and if you very quickly take the team and think about it like, okay, what if we were a group of people on a desert island? Well, if you're in a desert island, you're deserted island. Mm-hmm. May not be a desert, but it's an island.
It's an island.
It's a deserted island.
It could have a desert.
Could be a deserted desert island. Could be. But the point there is like you're now in a situation where the outside world is taken away. You have a team of 4, 5, or 50 people who now are relying 100% on each other to survive and thrive. What do people do as individuals? Right? You're going to have the natural leaders who hopefully kind of rise up and create structure, and that structure is evolving and positive. You're going to have other leaders who rise up and say, no. Mm-hmm. If there's leadership here, I need to be part of it because that's how I value myself. And they may not actually be helpful at all.
Right.
Then you have people who say, hey, I'm not much of anything. I'm not very important, but if I can collect firewood and every day I can wake up and collect firewood, that adds value, I'll do it, right? But those people we value highly because they might have undervalued themselves, but they recognize that, hey, their value is not in who they are, but what they contribute. So they because they've got maybe lower self-worth, they say, okay, I need to contribute something. Mm-hmm. What can I do to add value to kind of advance the team and the org? And they say, well, how about firewood, right? Other people say, no, guys, this is the way we need to do it. It creates conflict between approach A and approach B. But I think when we think about teams and healthy teams, it's kind of like, hey, what would this look like? What would Sammy do on that desert island?
Right.
What would Jason be doing on the desert island? What would so and so be doing? I think it's a fun question to ask for us to kind of start to get to the what a healthy team looks like and how well they model behavior.
Yeah, and kind of going on that analogy further, if I've decided on my own that I needed to collect firewood, and you're saying that's really valuable, but Fred over here decides that he wants to collect firewood as well, and I'm not communicating to him. Yes. And we both show up, and we both collected firewood. Do we get pats on the back? No. Because it was unnecessary for us both to collect firewood. Fred could have gone out fishing because we didn't have anybody that was fishing that day. Right. So great, we can go make the fire to cook the food that we didn't catch.
That's right.
So I think that's a critical point, and that's kind of, it feeds well into this analogy of visualizing the work. That's what it's all about, right? So if we are not visualizing the work and communicating with each other, then there's no point in us going assigning tasks to ourselves.
You're right.
And so this is where Agile solves for these dilemmas, right? It solves for the desert or deserted island dilemma, right?
Deserted desert island.
So now, I mean, this is a perfect example of how Agile can be used for virtually anything that we do, right?
Yeah.
Holistically. I have a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and he was explaining the way that they assign work, and basically they have a queue and they grab it out of the queue and they start working. And he was explaining to me verbally how he tackles his work. And I told him, I said, you're working in an Agile project management methodology, whether you know it or not.
Right.
And I think that's the thing, is it's inherently built to kind of accommodate the natural needs of a team.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that we operate.
Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of brings me to my next kind of thought here, which is if we rewind 4 or 5 years for Archetype, we had an inflection point where Archetype was largely a New England-based firm focused on 3 or 4 key verticals: life sciences, financial services, insurance, manufacturing. And we had great relationships with our customers. We were innovative in our thought process, and it was a great business. But the world was changing under our feet dramatically, right? It was basically pre-cloud, post-cloud was kind of the world we were seeing. And so we made a decision like, hey, we're not gonna be dragged from this pre-cloud world to this post-cloud world. We're gonna go there and try to jump the curve a little bit. So we went out and we found 3 new real cloud partners or cloud-centric partners. So, AWS Snowflake, kind of one partner, but really Snowflake being the predominant partner there. AWS is a growing partner there. Tableau around visualizations, and then thirdly, OneStream, which is kind of our partner in the CPM, corporate performance management, kind of the finance org, and closing the books, management reporting, budgeting, planning, forecasting, all that stuff, right? So we chose these partners, and we said, hey, we're not going to go to market so much around our expertise in industry right now. We're going to go to market on our expertise on software and how it applies to these problems we're trying to solve. So let's become the smartest people we can on OneStream, on Snowflake, on AWS. And that was easier said than done, because if you look at this marketplace, it's not really a one-headed monster. It's an ecosystem, right? So it's learning an ecosystem. It's like saying, hey, I'm going to be an expert on jungles. Like, but there's 1,000 kingdom phyla species in a jungle, right? And so we've grown that way pretty successfully. We're for 4x our size we were back then, and a lot of that growth has been around what I would call either platform or product thinking, not project thinking. So I think when the traditional business person thinks of consultants, it's like these engagements are project or projects. We're going to engage, and our work, the deliverable is working through a bunch of tasks, hopefully not too much PowerPoint, but I'm sure it's in there. And you solve some problems, but it generically feels different than building something like, metaphorically, a house, right? Where I think the industry is changing quickly. I call it the appification of the world, where as consumers, we're so used to buying apps on our iPhones or whatever else. I mean, if you're on an Android phone, sorry, but on these platforms, we buy apps, and apps seem to be the new smallest unit of measure in terms of value is an app. Yeah. And I think that kind of flows over into our business relationships. We're like, hey, what am I buying? How does it work? Can I look at it? Can I touch it? Can I feel it? If you're selling me business process change, I don't want to buy process change. I want to buy an app. Right. So we've started selling that way. And so we're trying to sell more kind of productization or platforms as opposed to projects. Right. How does that kind of play out in your kind of framework around Agile?
Well, I think the Agile framework, and again, I want to kind of reference what I did in the blogs, where we're talking about Agile has become a noun, and it's not a noun, right? And that's a really critical concept to kind of embrace, because then, people will say, oh, I'm agile, our team is agile. Well, good, you can change on the fly, but agile is not a process. Being agile is not a process. It's a way of thinking. Another key point that I'd like to make, and I didn't reference this in the posts, but I think it's critical to make, is thinking lean as well. Okay, and so when you combine that with agile, and you start to put these processes in place for the
So by lean, you mean keto?
It's all the same, yeah. By definition, right? Put it as a noun, and
exactly.
Make it a proper noun, and call it lean.
So cut the carbs out of your projects.
That's it. Cut the carbs out.
Good.
Yep. Trim the fat, and that's exactly what you need. But it's to me, lean agile project management is purely elimination of waste, and that's what you want to do. So how do you eliminate waste? Well, the first thing is you identify the waste. And when you start thinking in those terms, that's when you can start to apply those practices to the use cases that you're referring to. Part of agile project management also teaches people to think more like what I call a product thinker. So yes, there's project thinking, and there's kind of a program thinking, but what is a true product thinker? That's someone who is understanding the problems, right? What problem is Jason having, and how am I going to solve for it? So, there's a famous story. Well, it's famous to me. Maybe it's not famous to everybody else, but they say that, if Henry Ford had tried to just solve for the problems that everybody wanted him to solve for, he would have built a faster horse. People didn't know that there was an alternative, right? So if he said, well, Jason, what problem are you having? Well, my horse is too slow. I need a faster horse. Okay, I'm going to go build a faster horse. He's not solving for the problem that you're really having. The problem that you're having is you are unable to get from point A to point B in a fast way, right? Okay, well, then your problem is actually that you need an alternative mode of transportation that is affordable. So what did he do? He democratized the automobile, and that completely unlocked a new industry, and that's where he became, obviously, everybody knows him.
I mean, it's very true. I kind of wonder. I mean, it's what Elon Musk has done with Tesla is he's kind of fallen in line with Henry Ford in a sense, saying, here's the colors you can choose from, and there's only really maybe five colors you can get a Tesla in.
Yep.
And I wonder, are you really saving money, or are you just trying to sound and feel like Henry Ford?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, for me, Tesla, I think what Elon did for the industry is proved that really there is a need and a market for the electric cars. However, one could argue that his cars aren't really just electric cars. They're actually software that's built on a car platform.
Oh, totally, absolutely.
And so that's where a lot of people say, I had a friend of mine who said he loved Tesla so much that he said even if they were ICE engines and internal combustion engines, he'd still buy them because of the software.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, what problem did Elon solve for? Did he solve for the problem that we have with gas and fossil fuels? Or did he solve for the desire of people to want a different model for the way they engage and utilize their cars?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's up for debate, really.
Well, I mean, I don't know how publicly well-known this is, but he's given away a lot of his patents on the design of the car.
All open source.
And the whole powertrain, which I'm not sure you still call it powertrain in a battery-powered car, but the powertrain, that's open source. And I think a lot of these rapidly rising electric cars from Mercedes and Porsche and everyone else, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that open source has kind of helped people solve some problems more quickly, where he's paid heavily the cost of being the first to market. Correct. Right? Mm-hmm. So we all get to look at what is Lucid or Rivian or anyone else and say, these guys are great. But they weren't first to market.
That's right.
He paid the cost of doing that, which is, I love the innovation. And I think it's hard. I was watching recently a video on this, I can't remember the name of the rocket engine, but he's designed, or his team has designed a new rocket engine that's kind of different from traditional rocket engines. And I geek out this stuff on YouTube. Spend way too much time. I won't admit the hours I spend. My wife knows. But he recognized, hey, if we're going to get into the space race and be able to do things that are competitive and reusable, repeatable, we've got to figure out a cheaper a more resilient rocket engine that's actually more powerful, but also doesn't blow up after one use.
Right.
And there's no question that Elon Musk is a product thinker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's created a lot of product thinkers. And product thinking is, we could write a ton of blog posts on becoming a product thinker. I think it's learning to ask the right questions and digging in. For example, one of my clients that I started engaging with, before we even started the project, I stopped and just asked them, why did you choose this platform? And they stopped for a moment. It took a while to think about why. And we were able to quantify the value that they saw.
Anticipated.
Yeah, exactly. The value that they anticipated, right? And then we were able to validate, was that realistic?
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand the kind of the life cycle of a project like this, or buying a SaaS platform or whatever the platform is. That you have to understand there's this kind of, they get their hopes up. They think it's going to solve all of their problems, right? And they hit what I call the trough of despair. So you get high. It's gonna solve all of our problems that we have, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, okay, well, it's not going to solve for this problem, or it's not going to solve for that problem. It still solves for the bulk of the issues that you had previously, right? It's about resetting those expectations, but a lot of that, to kind of soften the curve and bring that curve up, is on us consultants to make sure that they understand the value, right? Thinking like a product thinker and helping them regain the trust in that platform that they've chosen to invest in.
Yeah, and we probably need to land the plane on this one relatively soon. So there's a consultant who used to work with us. Her name was Ruth, and she was a fantastic leader, fantastic manager of projects. But she, like me, had this a little bit of impatience around just making sure we kind of get to the end of something. And she had this little symbol she would do in a conversation saying, if you're talking too much, if you looked over and she was doing this, like, it's time to land the plane. But in the spirit of landing the plane, I think we can all learn a lot when we think about product thinking, because I think product thinking is different, right? If I pitch you on a great idea, like a business case, right? The business case is on PowerPoint. I have to talk to it and kind of get you excited.
Right,
and there's a bunch of excitement, a bunch of the numbers can be great, but there's nothing like an MVP.
Correct.
A minimally viable product. Let's not talk about what could be. Let's just demonstrate the product.
Right.
No one does it better than Apple. Every one of Apple's advertisements, whether on a billboard or on TV, Apple doesn't advertise. They just demonstrate the product. And so that's product thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And the more we can manage the work we're doing towards product, and I mentioned platform earlier, we're probably not going to get into platform thinking a whole lot, but just put it simply, platform thinking is when we get to take a bunch of tasks and worries and issues off of our customers' concerns and put them into our environment that we wrap our process around.
Yeah.
And now we have a platform they're leveraging. The metaphor I use is like the electric company, right? I walk to the switch, I flip it, the lights come on, they go off. Right. I don't think about it until I lose power. And in the US, we lose power, it's 2 or 3 days. That's it. Out of 365, it's it just works.
Right.
But there are thousands of people who work nonstop to make it work.
Right.
So platform product thinking is where I think we as consultants need to move. Honestly, I think the Agile, I love the idea that if you can see it, you can manage. If you can't see it, you can't manage it.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's great.
Well, thank you so much for having me again.
Yes,
this has been wonderful, and hopefully our next interactions we'll be talking a little bit more about product thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.